All right. Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining. Today, we're going to introduce you to Cloud User Hub, the old spin panel. My name is Bennett Post. I'm joined today by my colleague Vincent Meyan. We are happy to join you and appreciate your interest. Before we dive into Cloud User Hub, just a couple of housekeeping rules. Today we have our colleagues available in the question area, so if you have any questions, please drop them there. At the end of this webinar, we'll have some time to answer the questions, the most relevant questions, and if we do not have enough time, we'll make sure to follow up on it. The agenda for today: introduction of ourselves, why did we build Spin Panel, the basis of Cloud User Hub, and obviously, and that's the reason why you're here, we have Vincent to demonstrate what Cloud User Hub is all about. So my name is Bennett Post. I said that. I'll be your host. I'll be asking questions to Vincent. At Spin Panel, I was heading sales and marketing. At Enable, I'll be doing more or less the same, but then as the senior manager for sales. And this is Vincent. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you for joining. Yeah, my name is Vincent. I was one of the co-founders of Spin Panel, and we built this product as an MSP. So today I'm the senior manager and architect of Spin Panel, which is now Cloud User Hub. So I'm really happy to be in this webinar and give you the demo today.
Sounds good, and we understand and appreciate that most of the attendees will probably be here to see more about the product and how they could value of it. But before they go there, maybe a short introduction why we thought that it was necessary to build such a solution. So Vincent, could you maybe share a bit about your life as an MSP before you started to create the solution?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been working for an MSP in the SMB space for roughly 15 years. And of course, when I started, cloud was very in the early beginnings. But we soon identified the very need for automation and standardization, which is today still as actively needed as it was at that point in time. And we were a Microsoft partner. We started actually with the Azure, the first versions of Azure and Microsoft 365, so the BPOS productivity suite. And we soon identified that even if you build solutions for customers or deploy and manage Microsoft 365 environments, we saw that engineers are still building their own standards. Of course, everyone had scripts or methods to do things. While we thought, well, this is cloud, this is standard. Of course, you can configure it specifically for a customer, but what if we could standardize it in such a way that we could deploy quicker, easier, so less rework, less issues that the customer experience, and then actually focus on what the customer needs in the Microsoft 365 space. Now, and that's why we built the tool, which is now Cloud User Hub. So it's really that automation hub for everything Microsoft 365. But besides the automation, it also provides a friendly interface. And that's something that's also very important because you can do a lot of scripting. Scripting is still complex. And what Cloud User Hub can do is bring this scripting capability to a more low-code solution, but also bring it to your end customer, because that was one of the other things that we found important. We wanted to involve the customer in the whole process of their tenant. So, of course, Microsoft considers Microsoft 365 really like a product that they sell to the end customer, with partners being very important for the implementation and management. But it sounded strange to us that on a Sunday evening, if you wanted to have a user provisioned, that you need to give your provider a call or your MSP a call and then ask for that action to be done. That should just be a button press. So that's also something that we clearly brought into the product.
Makes sense. And because all of the attendees were probably MSPs, what were specific pain points you were experiencing with managing the Microsoft Cloud that we are trying to solve with Cloud User Hub? Can you mention some of it?
Yeah, we saw a couple of things. First of all, the whole provisioning and billing aspect. So let's call it the commercial aspect of selling the license. When we started with cloud, it was all credit card. Perhaps some of you still remember that you have a pile of credit cards laying around just to manage your customers and being able to pay. So Microsoft soon introduced then the CSP, the Cloud Solution Provider Program, which is now the standard in which everyone is operating. But it was at that point, it was still very new, but it offered a good opportunity to start consolidate billing, making that more easy. Because if you can't sell cloud, you cannot provision and manage cloud. So that was the first thing that we solved. And that's still a key thing that's in our product today. So you can manage subscriptions, you can see pricing. We have, for example, dashboards and reporting that provide you insights in those statistics. So that's the first thing that you probably want to have. If you can't sell and bill, then it's the end of the whole cloud journey, of course. The other thing that we identified was if you're going to deploy a tenant, you probably want to standardize it. So you want to set baselines. You want to read back things like secure score over multiple tenants. And that's where the multi-tenancy aspect comes in. Of course, you have the partner center, and that is between brackets multi-tenants. You can manage multiple customers, and then you can step into the actual environment of the customer. But it's still, up until today, quite tedious and slow.
It is.
So we wanted to have a mechanism to immediately issue multiple commands to multiple tenants or read back information from those tenants. So that's the time saver capability that we brought into the platform. If you're on the engineering team or on the support desk team, you don't want to flip portals all day long and manage multiple tabs. So we've seen it often that someone has 20, 30 tabs open just to manage customers, which is quite annoying and tedious and it costs a lot of time. If you can do this from a single pane of glass and then very easily step into or execute commands against those tenants, that really saves you time. And the last thing that we identified is not every customer is the same. It's cloud, it's standardized, but we still wanted to have it highly configurable. It's not one size fits all. And that's where the command sets and the command blocks come in. So command block is the smallest thing that you can execute. Let's say you want to set a setting in Microsoft Teams. But if you want to do this in a set, so you want to bring context in the sense that you want to onboard a user or offboard a user, you need to probably do multiple things. That's the not only time saver capability, but also allowing you as an MSP to tweak the offering specifically to your customer, benefit from the standardization that Microsoft 365 can bring, but keep the freedom to configure it for your customer as you see fit. That's very important because a lot of tools today on the market can only do one thing. They can fire those commands against multiple tenants, or they fit you into a very strict regime that you need to deploy to your customer, and that's what we wanted to prevent.
Okay. And we all know that in the Microsoft ecosystem, we try to bring the solutions to Microsoft partners. Who is the Cloud User Hub exactly for? We know there are indirect resellers, there are direct CSPs. For who is it?
Yeah, that's another important thing that we tackled. We wanted the platform from the beginning to be multi-tier. That means that we can work with indirect providers, CSP direct, but also indirect resellers. So effectively, the platform is for every CSP, MSP out there. But it's also for your end customer. Again, taking back that example of the command blocks and the command sets, the onboarding of a user or the purchasing of a license or a subscription, actually, that should also be able to be done by your end customer, we think. So to be able to do that, you need to have very fine-grained role-based access into the product. The partner center is for partners. It's not for customers. Well, you could allow your customer access, but I wouldn't do it. So that's one of the things that we also tackled. So we make that fine-grained role-based access available in the platform so that you now can actually delegate functionality that you normally can't do, because the partner center, again, is just for you as an MSP. But now you can actually delegate partner center actions to your end customer as well. So it's really that magic mix around being a partner, serving the customer to the best capabilities that you can do, and on all levels and all tiers.
All levels until the end customer.
Up until the end customer, yeah.
Cool. I already saw one question coming in. Maybe we have some extra time to answer those already. Can the Cloud User manage tenants that are not under CSP but are standalone tenants?
Principally speaking, yes, but you will need to onboard the customer themselves. So it is possible, but it's not really straightforward. So the easiest thing to do, and that's also a requirement if you want to do what we call the auto configuration, so that you don't have to provide credentials or a setup per customer, is that you onboard them into the CSP program, which is effectively quite easy. If you're an indirect reseller of CSP Direct, you have that partner center, but you can also even invite the customer from within Cloud User Hub. So you don't need to go to the partner center specifically. You can just press a button, send a link out to the customer and onboard them in the product. That's just the easiest.
Hopefully that answered the question. And one other question from my end. Obviously, we were acquired by Enable. We are here today as Enable. From your perspective, what makes it that this is such a good fit being part of Enable?
Well, you see that Enable, of course, has that very broad portfolio and that legacy of being the very high value RMM vendor. There is a lot of crossover between the products. Think about the Cove data protection offering. You can imagine that that aligns perfectly well with Microsoft 365. So it's the broad options and capabilities that you have, and now also bringing in Microsoft 365 Cloud Management. It really completes the offering, I think, and that is, of course, not something we could do when we were still SpinPanel. We had that small capability of just being on the Microsoft Cloud only, having the options to tap into all those capabilities. That makes it really powerful. So now you can work from on-prem, hybrid, cloud, over the whole stack, essentially, and that makes it, I think, a very good fit.
Nice, nice. Well, when we joined Enable, that was the 1st of July, and I remember good that I was doing some webinars to introduce Cloud User Hub or bring it to most of the Enable customers. But I also know that we've been evolving the product so much over the period. So maybe it's good to show everyone how it looks today and what the value is for them. So with that, I would give you the floor and let's get our hands dirty on the product.
Yeah, let's do some live demos. We did a lot indeed. So we did it, and it still keeps evolving even on a weekly basis. So we're releasing a tremendous pace at this point in time. One of the first things we did is add a lot of content. So I'm going to get into that. But first, I want to give you the highlights and the principles of the application. So let's go through this. Currently, I'm logged in as the MSP. And you can see that on the right, left top, sorry, Cloud User Hub Sandbox. That's my demo account, of course. What I said about the multi-tenancy, that is key in the product. We don't want you to switch customers and then back, forth. That's way too much work. So what Cloud User Hub effectively can do is aggregate data into multiple, in a single view, sorry, multiple customers into a single view. So you see that I'm now looking at the customer cafe store, but I also have Commander Shop in this view. And I can just add multiple customers into this view if I need to. So if I want to bring in cake and biscuits, I can just do that. And then cake and biscuits will also be added into the customer view. Now, the nice thing about this is that you can get an instant overview of all the users in all tenants in a single grid. And it's a powerful grid because you can do extensive filtering and grouping. You can see that I've now used grouping on a per customer level. You can drop that group, you can just leave it like that. Now it's all aggregated. I can search, so I can search users in all tenants. So let's do everything starting with a B, for example. You can see that I get users from different tenants, and then I can do the grouping again to get that more clear. And I even can export the data if I want to. So if I press export, it will generate a CSV export that I can use in external systems. I will get back on external integration because we have that as well, using tools like Power Automate, and even the APIs are open for you to work with. But this very simplistic view of users already gives you the insight and the capabilities that the multi-tenancy, in a whole different way than normal products do, can bring. Because this view will also be remembered. So think about that service engineer. You probably don't manage all your 200 customers at the same time. That's not something you
probably
do.
Don't.
So you have your fixed group of customers you work with from a day-to-day, need to work with from a day-to-day basis. If you log back into the system in Cloud User Hub, and that's an addition we did recently, we will just keep all the filters and views that you had when you left. So you don't have to populate everything again. So you don't have to dig in all the customers and find them and start searching for things. It's all being remembered as you had it on screen. And you can easily step into a customer to make adjustments. So now I'm at the customer level Cafe Store, and you can see that we read back the data. What's important to note, and that's also a difference to many other systems, is that we read back live from Microsoft. All the information you see on screen is coming directly from Graph. So that means if multiple people work at the same customer, you would see the data being populated in real time on your screen. That's an important aspect. So there is no syncing or delayed execution of this type of data. It's all coming in live. And the same applies for groups, for example. So we can manage Microsoft 365 groups, security groups, but we also have our own internal groups set up. And also with the groups, you would see that principle of having multiple group types, for example. So now I can still do this. I only have one organization, but I'm still going to show you how that should work. There you go. Now let's create a group. This is all Microsoft 365. Now let's create a group directly into Graph, and let's choose security group. Now you can see that the multi-tenancy is being presented in a different view. These are all the customers that I, specifically me as a user, am allowed to manage. I told you about the fine-grained roles and capabilities, and I'm going to show you that later. But it's not necessarily all the customers that you see over here. Only the customers that you're allowed to create groups for. And that's a very important aspect as well. We had a fairly large customers at SpinPanel as well. And it was just not allowed to see all the 200 customers and being a global admin. It's really a thing to be an admin on 200 customers. And that's something that a lot of customers don't like anymore. They now know about that concept. Yeah. Of course, Microsoft is also bringing in GDAP quite soon to get that fine-grained capabilities. It's important. So you want to have that specific access to your customer. Now, let's create a security group for Cafe Store. Let's call it webinar. That's too easy. There we go. And that's it. It's now live created into the tenant of the customer. And you can see that the grouping now also displays it not only at a customer level. So let's add a Commander Shop into the mix again. Or Cake and Biscuit, now Commander Shop. There we go. Now I can get all the groups for the various types, for the various customers. I can even export it to CSV again if I want to. And again, important to mention, if you would now log into the Office portal, you would of course directly see that group because it's all live. There's no synchronization required. Now the nice thing about this, I told about the filters. So if I flip back, you can see that I keep the filters. It even kept my search result. So I searched for everything starting with B. And if I go back to groups, I have that same view again. So if you're in a certain flow and that you need to set up a customer or you need to set up multiple customers at the same time, then this is very powerful because you can just easily navigate. And this is really a fundamental difference from many systems. So we think about this from functionality and not from customer context. You want to do something with users. You don't want to first figure out what you want to do on which organization, or you want to work with users. That's what you want to do. You want to create a user. And that's what the platform effectively brings. One of the other things that is important is the authorization capability that I mentioned. So the fine-grained role-based access. So you see that we have a lot of roles over here. This very much is similar to how you can work with the Microsoft 365 roles, which, by the way, you can also manage with the Cloud User Hub. So you can also assign members to Microsoft 365 roles. Now, these roles give you a very specific access for specific actions. So what I just mentioned, if you need to have access to groups and users only, then you can configure it as such. The fine-grained capabilities can be a little bit tough to work with if you have a lot of groups to manage. So of course, it's possible to not only add specific users to these groups, to these roles, but you can also add group-based assignments. So let's take Cafe Store. And you can see that I can work with the groups from Cafe Store specifically. I have no one in this demo set, sorry for that. And I can select users. Now, the nice thing about Cloud User Hub is that you don't manage roles on a per customer basis. You don't have to go into each and every customer, manage the role, go back, manage the role, go back. No, same principle. It's also multi-tenant. So let's say that I want to give Azure Active Directory Group Administrator access to multiple customers at once for a user. Let's pick the user, Ben Butt. Apologies, I need to do it differently. I made a mistake. There we go. Let's take the user. Let's take myself. Now I can immediately add myself or a colleague to multiple organizations, multiple customers at once. So that means that I don't have to go into each customer to configure the access specifically. But on the other hand, I can also have a clear overview of who has access to which customers. So if I want to give myself, in this case, access to multiple customers, I do it like that. People that work often with Azure probably know this concept as the scoping of access. That's where it's very similar. And by just doing so, I now have given myself instantly access to multiple customers. Now you can also add yourself into a group and then add the group to the role. And then you just have to be a member of the group, which is even more simplistic, of course. Yeah. So most of the time you just create something like a customer management group A or something, and then you add that whole group to a certain set of customers. You just make users member of the group and you don't have to manage the roles at all anymore. So it's very powerful from multiple contexts. So if you look at the scopes, you get that overview of customers and groups and people that have access to the certain customers and which scope is applicable. This is one of the most powerful features of the product, because this also makes sure that you don't see data that you're not allowed to see. So you're not running into strange error messages like 403s because you're trying to do something on graph that you're not allowed to, because we extend this concept to graph as well. So if you cannot create a Microsoft 365 group in the platform and vice versa, so you're not allowed to do it in the graph, and you also cannot create a role into Cloud User Hub, because that creates a lot of confusion, because there's of course a disconnect between what the management feature is versus what can happen in graph. And that's what we call solutions. So
before we go there, I saw one question coming by for role management. So, and the question was, is there a way to give a user temporary admin role for a specific process as needed, but not provide admin all the time?
Yeah. I want to park that until we get to command blocks, but yes, that can be done. So let's keep this one in mind. First of all, before you can actually do something with roles, you need to, of course, onboard your customer. Well, we have a wizard that can onboard multiple customers at once. That's also the wizard that you would use if you would start using Cloud User Hub. And principally speaking, that means that we can read back all the customers that live in your partner center. So that's a list of customers that you see over here. And then those customers will be assigned solutions. Now, why are we doing this? Why are you not getting full access to the customer? For two reasons. One, the fine-grained access that I just mentioned. But secondly, not all customers are equal. You might have customers that use, for example, Azure AD Premium licensing, while others do not. And then that also has an effect on the actions that you can issue against the tenant. If we wouldn't make sure that we can execute commands against a certain tenant, then you would run into all kinds of weird issues, especially if you do multi-tenancy. That's what we call solutions. Now, a solution is very special in the way it requests access to the tenant. You're probably used to have a DAP relation, so delegated access relation, which gives you full access. Effectively, every admin agent, so every engineer that is an admin agent in the partner center has that full access capabilities, the full global admin, effectively. And that's a thing. It's problematic for a lot of customers. They don't want that. It opens up for attack because you have multiple engineers having all the access to all the customers. And Cloud User Hub prevents that. And the way we do that is effectively ask permission only for the parts that you want to manage. Now, you see that Cafe Store, or in this case, Cloud User Hub, has all the actions available, all the solutions available, but you don't have to, of course. So if you work with a customer and the customer says, well, you're only allowed to manage Exchange Online, then that's the only thing that Cloud User Hub can do, and therefore all the engineers that use Cloud User Hub can do. They don't have to be an admin agent. They don't have to have any admin credentials for that matter. They can be a regular Azure AD user in your partner tenant, still have powerful capabilities against Exchange Online, giving the roles and the solutions that are applicable, but they are not an admin in the customer's tenant anymore. That's a very important aspect to protect your customer against attack from that wide open relationship.
Yeah, so when an employee leaves the company, you do not need to withdraw his access to that customer tenant, but you can terminate his or her M365 account.
Yeah, that's one of the things, but it's also the other way around. So if you work with a customer and the customer says like, okay, I don't want you to manage my Teams environment because it's critical for me. I don't want you to do that because just help me with my licensing or help me with my subscriptions, then that is something that you can do. So it's that fine-grained capability that brings in the secure access. What we also do is that while we depend on the Microsoft relationship still, we make sure that the accounts that we use, so you provide a service account that will have access to the customer's tenant, that service account is scoped back in the access that I just mentioned. So it would be scoped back to Exchange Online, for example. But at the same time, we also enforce multi-factor on that service account automatically when you onboard the customer. So we add multiple layers of protection instead of having that wide open delegated access relation that's normally present. So those are the things that surrounding the security model make it very powerful. Now, if you look at functional things that you can do, you can work with users and groups. I just showed you that from the interface. But of course, Microsoft 365 is way more than that. Now, we could build a UI for all the specific capabilities, and we have at many points. But we also decided that it would be really good to have a large library of content to work with, which we call command blocks. Now, what is then a command block? Let me show you one. The same thing that I just did with the create group, I can also do with what we call the command block. The command block is a low-code solution. There we go. That's that cafe store. And a command block is a low-code solution that can visually, in the UI itself, execute any API or PowerShell script that is part of the command block against a tenant. Now that makes it powerful because you don't have to write the PowerShell script. You don't have to know anything about the APIs. You can just use the command blocks as such. But the nice thing about a command block is that we standardize the in and output. Just keep that in mind for what I'm going to show you, because that's an important thing. So let's add a command job. You can see that I have more or less the same interface for creating a group. So it almost looks the same as that normal interface, but this interface is not built, it's code. And that means that we can add commands very quickly and very easily, and you would still work in the same interface. And of course, the parameters would be different, but this allows us to bring a lot of content in from a generic setup. Okay. So when you can run a command block, you just choose from the large library that we have, and you just saw that over here. So we have this library of command block for Microsoft 365, but we also have them, for example, for Partner Center, so you can work with your customers. We even have them for Azure Active Directory, so you can work with that part. So there are a lot of commands that you can use, and we can tap into many levels. So it's not limited to only Microsoft 365 products. You can also interact with Azure AD, and you can set things like multi-factor authentication, revoke sessions, that kind of thing. That's very important.
That was one of the questions. So yeah. Thanks for answering it.
That you can do. And I also mentioned that you could manage the directory roles, the Microsoft 365 directory roles. Well, you see that section over here. And that we would come back to the question, can you temporarily elevate someone in and out?
Yeah.
Yes, you can do that, because what you can do is schedule a command block. So you can someone can be a member of the role temporarily based on a schedule, for example, but you can also schedule the offboarding of the user from the role.
Cool.
So if you create two command blocks, and that's where configuration is more important than standardization, because this is something you want to work in a certain context, you can take those command blocks, and you see that you have the add a member to a directory role that would elevate them into the role.
Yeah.
But you also have remove member from a directory role. Well, you can compose that. So you can create schedules and making sure that that process is being done. So you can have them elevate in and out. And you can imagine the flexibility that this concept will bring. And again, you don't need to have the knowledge about how that PowerShell script looks like. But the nice thing also about this is if I switch to a customer view, this is the customer cafe store, you can see the customer also has command blocks available. But up to your discretion, so you can define which command blocks or which actions the customer can execute.
Yeah, so in that case, we are talking about self-service options.
Yes.
To make sure that your support desk receives less tickets requests from customers, for instance.
Yeah. And a clear example is, of course, user management or user onboarding. And that's actually the next capability that we bring in. You have those command blocks, but those are single executions. Create a user, create a group, add to the role, remove from the role, all single executions. Now, what you want to do with that is that you want to bring this into context of what we call a command set. The nice thing about command blocks is that we standardize the input and output. You already saw that we can talk to Azure AD and to Microsoft 365, so that's all graph, but also Partner Central, which is a different API. You would need to know all the APIs and the input and the output to schemas. You need to know and have an understanding of that to make it work. So you probably, if you see this, you think quite quickly on tools like Power Automate and Zapier, but those are a little bit more technical because you need to be able to interpret the in and output and then work with that. The beauty about this is that we all standardized it. So the input is always the same. The amount of parameters may vary, but the principle is very simplistic to understand. And that's where command sets come in. So command set.
Before we go to command sets, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it was a question we got twice, and I know we have it. So is there an audit trail to see what executions were done by a user or something?
Yeah, that's also one important aspect about those standardization options that we have in the product. We not only know which command block is executed for which customer, because of course that's very clear that multi-tenancy is in the product, but we also extend that audit trail into graph. Normally, if you would do something with a service account, you would see service account A did something in the customer's tenant.
Of course.
And you lose the visibility that vendor did something in the customer's tenant because that's the elevation aspect. Now, what we do is we connect vendor to the action that has happened by the service account and even link back to the correlation ID, for example, in graph. So that if something happens in graph, you can look back into the audit trail of Cloud User Hub to see what happened. So that's very important.
Could it help proving that an employee or even a customer bought a new license in NC, because we all know that with NC you're committed for a longer period.
Definitely, that's one of the first reasons we actually built it. Not so much because we didn't trust our own engineers, but more or less, if you do self-servicing and someone indeed orders the 100 licenses in NCE and you forget about the termination period that is applicable, then that's a problem, right? So that gives you a clear insight in what happened, but that's not the only thing. So the audit trail is important. You need to have that end-to-end visibility, but because you know what the customer is doing, you can also interact on that. So you can also make sure that you revert the changes that were happening. So if someone suddenly orders 100 seats, you can set a Power Automate flow on that to make sure that it's being reverted. So I'm going to show you something like that as well. Those command sets. I'm first going to show you what a command set does in the context of having multiple blocks, and then I want to show you the schedules as well. What a command set therefore can do is, I have two examples that we have predefined in the product, but you can also freely design them. Getting back on that later, command set designer. But the principle of the user onboarding, offboarding. So the user onboarding, that's something that is very important because user onboarding is just way more, of course, than just creating a user. So in this case, it's a very simplistic command set just for the purpose of explaining. But in the user onboarding, if you just create a user, that's not good enough. So what this will do is it creates the user, it gets a group from Azure AD, and then adds it as a member. And you can extend on this concept. So you could add them then to a Teams channel. You could set up a mailbox. You could delegate access to other mailboxes.
You could set security settings, for instance.
You can set security settings. All those kind of things you can move into the set. And that's again, the configuration flexibility that you have. Because we just built this as something to prove like, hey, this is how you do an onboarding, but it might not work for you or your customer. You need to have that freedom and capabilities to build it as you want. And the same applies for offboarding. So if you think about offboarding, again, as an example, the cafe store. Oh, sorry, wrong one. So this one. So in the offboarding, for example, we reset the password, we disable the user, we converted the user to a shared mailbox if he has a license that you can also check. So this allows you to do an automatic offboarding. Now, the nice thing is that, again, the same as with command blocks, you can also provide these sets that you can build as an MSP to your end customer. So either the service desk use them, so you don't forget about, hey, they're converting to a shared mailbox is forgot, or the license is not unassigned.
Because you can schedule it as well.
And you can schedule it, so that all those things can be done. And this does two things. It provides the standardization that you want. You never forget about things that you need to do. But it also provides the time saving, because it's just assign, single click, be done with it. And it also helps you with the self-servicing from a customer perspective, because you can grant this capability, which is normally technically complex, because if you want to do this, you at least have to go through a couple of portals, think about Exchange Online, Azure AD, and perhaps you need to do something with Teams as well. So then you're already hopping through multiple portals, doing all those manual actions, and this can do that in a single execution.
So you can build your own command sets. You can make them as big as you like. You can make as many as you like, but you need command blocks. One of the questions we got was, could you add command blocks yourself, or is it limited to the command blocks that are provided by Enable?
Yeah, currently it's limited by the command blocks that we build as Enable. I never say never, but we did some, of course, partner interviews, and we talked a lot with partners, and they actually said to us, we would like to have first a library of blocks that are commonly used. Think about the things that you do with Exchange, delegate a mailbox, convert a mailbox, delegate a calendar, all those kind of things. Reset a password, revoke access, set MFA, all those command blocks that you commonly use on a day-to-day basis, those have been added into the product, and we're still adding command blocks on a week-to-week basis, actually. So I never say never, but the command set was more important and was requested as a higher feature than I want to script myself.
Makes sense.
And especially because that brings the configuration that you need. Now, one of the aspects you already mentioned a couple of times, but I didn't show you yet, is the scheduling. Because what you see me do on screen right now is all quite interactive. Now let's think about, you want to report on settings of multiple tenants. And one of the things that immediately always came to mind was secure score. You want to track the secure score of all your tenants.
Yeah.
Now you can of course log into the tenant, check it, export the data, make a Power BI out of it, etc., etc. That can all be done. But you can also use a command block that just pulls that secure score, list the latest secure score from multiple tenants. So let's do Cafe Store Commander Shop. And you can see secure score has been retrieved multiple times. And now you see that I also have a report option. Some of the command blocks that are useful for reporting have this option. So if I click to reports, I will now get an aggregated overview and a Power BI report of the secure score for the specific tenants. And we have this on multiple levels. So the reporting is not only specifically for this command block. Where it makes sense, I will show you the license one as well. That's also nice. There we can provide the reporting. But this is not very easy to do if you want to do manual clicks. So then you still have the same problem. So that's why you need to bring in scheduling. So you just saw me execute a command block interactively, but of course you can also schedule it. So let's do that. Here you can see that I already have the command block scheduled, list the latest secure score. And it's very easy actually. So you can just add a scheduled job. The secure score has no input. That's easy. And there you go. I select a schedule. And done. It's scheduled.
Nice.
Now, those schedules, of course, you can freely define as you see fit. And you can define them multi-tenant again. So if I want to create a schedule for 3 customers at the same time, otherwise it's too tedious and too inconvenient, then you can do that as well. And then we support things like daily or weekly or monthly with all the things that you know from a regular scheduler. Now, all the things that you can get, or even the things that you can post, like you want to delay the onboarding of a user, those are things that you can schedule. And that makes it, of course, very powerful in that regard. Now, we also have reports that function at a higher level. If you think about the invoicing aspect, that first thing that we actually started with, if you sell something, you want to know what the cost is. That's what, for example, the invoice report will do. Now, the invoice report, and we use Power BI quite extensively, as you can see in the product, also allows you that multi-tenant insight into the invoice without having to convert it into Excel and do the segmentation yourself, for example. This takes all the information from Microsoft Partner Center APIs and then aggregates it on screen. And this is what I wanted to show you about the licensing. So you can see all the license aspects over here with the actual quantities and whatnot, and the actual cost that is associated with that.
So at this moment in time, we have that report available. Are we planning to release more?
We're planning to at least have CSP and PDF export. We might also integrate with connectors externally. But one important aspect is that if you have the pricing from Microsoft, it's purchasing. It's the pricing you need to pay to Microsoft.
Yeah.
Now that might not help you with your customers, right? So that's why we can bring what we call product management into the mix. So what product management will do is the following. If you go to products and services, you will see that I have products and pricing. So product and pricing over here. Perhaps you on a monthly basis, you pull the Excel/CSV file from the Partner Center to get the up-to-date pricing. You don't have to do that anymore. Cloud User Hub will get that automatically for you on a month-to-month basis. That's the nice thing. But then with those SKUs, you can also start creating product plans, as we call them. And product plans allow you to set up very specific margins and or bespoke pricing for specific SKUs from Microsoft. So that same report that you just saw, you can also provide to your end customer. You normally wouldn't do that because they will see the price that you need to pay to Microsoft and all your customers. So that's not a good thing. So you can target this report to a specific customer and then set that specific pricing as well. So in this case, in this product plan, you can see that I have 3 SKUs over here that have the 2 top ones have margin set up, and then the Microsoft 365 E3 has a bespoke price. Now you can assign these product plans and these price plans time-based or even overlapping for promo purposes, for example, to groups of customers, so segments of customers, and then based on the subscription purchasing versus the product plan lifetime, you automatically make sure that the pricing will be reflected in the report for your customers. So that's a very important aspect of the product for billing purposes. And that also adds to the self-service again. So these are things that we provide in the platform. Now, what if you want to do the extensive automation? So you want to work with those command sets, or even beyond that. That can also be done. So let's go to the command set designer. Let me show you how that works in product. So you make a choice in which category you want to build the command set. This is just for categorization. It's not specifically that you can only choose Microsoft 365 command blocks then. You can choose any command block for using the set, but this makes it so that you can find it easily in the product. So let's do Microsoft 365. You see the 2 command sets that we provide by default already. Now let's add a command set. Now you can choose from categories. Let's say that this is identity and X and it has to do with user management. And now you can see that I can do the following. You might need variables that you want to present to the user when you use the set. If you're interactively going to onboard a customer, a user, then you need to provide at least a username, for example. Now let's take the very simplistic example that I have just one parameter, and this is already becoming a little bit more technical, but still low code. I'm gonna refine it, require it. Sorry, and I will provide a name. There we go. That's it. So now the value test, the parameter test, can be used in the command set. And that's an important aspect because I told you about the command blocks are generic and can use input output. We can use the output from the command block and utilize it as input for the next command block and make a chain of command blocks. Yeah. But we can also bring those variables, in this case test, that I just created into the mix. So let's say I want to build a command set that does something with a user, add it to a group, for example, then I can do that as such. So I can bring in a command block and another command block. Let's do this context, doesn't matter, it's not really related, but fine. Now I can set parameters. So here you can see that I have my test that I want to use. So I can do that, I can click on it, and now test, when populated by the user, will be entered into this field. So this is how you connect multiple fields into a single set. Now, when you're done building this, and we also have, for example, evaluation. So if you get groups and the groups returned are not present, then you can skip execution or you can stop the execution of the whole set so that you don't try to do things that are not making any sense afterwards. So that's what the command set designer can do.
Looks good, looks good. In the meantime, I'm afraid we need to be a bit conscious of time.
Yeah.
I got one more question from the audience. Can you perform command blocks or command sets? And I know this is a difficult question to answer, but can you perform command blocks or sets against endpoint manager API endpoints? So to manage, for example, to pushing and central agents to devices.
It's not yet a feature in the product. Principally speaking, anything is possible, but it's not a command block that we offer today. But in regards to extensibility, it might be nice to show you the following example. So Power Automate is something that we'll release quite soon. And Power Automate connector allows you to do, let's say this. It's a very simplistic example, but it's nice to show you how that works. We can bring the capabilities of command blocks and the API that we have outside the product. So I'm hoping that my Power Automate will respond a bit better than this. There we go. So you can see that I can get users, and then I can post that in a Teams message. And this is very simplistic, of course, but this brings the power of command blocks. You can build a lot of things in Power Automate, and you can also bring a lot of things into scripting, of course. But now you have the standardization of command blocks and the multi-tenancy and the authorization aspects that we mentioned. And you can bring that into the Power Automate world and use several connectors to interact with those. So think about what you just mentioned about the NCE. You could build an approval flow that pops in an approval in Teams before you can actually buy the subscription, for example. Now, this is Teams. Here we are. This is my chat window. Let's see if we can do this. Execute the flow. There we go. Switch to Teams. And you can see that now the users are being retrieved.
Nice.
And being communicated against Teams. This is a very simplistic example, of course, but it on the other hand also shows you the power that you have to tap into multiple systems and start interacting and bring the data quite easily outside of Cloud User Hub without having to hassle with graph tokens, APIs, Partner Center, bring that all in the mix, and then work from there.
Cool, cool. So again, I'm sorry, but I think we need to be conscious of time. So let's go ahead to the next slide.
Yes.
And I appreciate that in this time frame, it's pretty difficult to show everything what is possible with Cloud User Hub. But if it triggers your interest, please be aware that we are at your disposal to show you more. Reach out to your sales representative or say yes in the chat. But you could also sign up in, and we're trying to get the slide on the screen. There it is. You could also sign up for free. Go to the URL on this slide and sign up for a free trial. You will get your assistants to sign up, and we'll reach out to everyone who has asked a question we didn't answer. One other question we already got, and I think it's important to answer that because we touched the thing that we have a multi-tier solution, and questions we regularly get from indirect resellers is, okay, are you integrating with my indirect provider? The answer is no, because at this moment in time, we are not integrating with any of the indirect providers. Obviously, we are in the conversations to get there.
Just to clarify, that doesn't mean that you cannot use Cloud User Hub.
That was what I wanted to.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, the only thing that you can do, of course, is manage subscriptions, because that's in the control of the provider. All the other things that I showed you in regards to the license insights or the secure scores and command blocks will just work. So that's a point to address.
Yeah. New question. Is this new functionality built into N Central, or is there any additional licensing costs?
The licensing cost is a question for you, of course, but it's currently a standalone product, literally called Cloud User Hub. So you can buy it as a standalone product. We're currently looking at integrations,
of course,
but right now it's a standalone product. Yes.
Sounds good. Any other? When onboarding a customer, does the customer still need to approve the allowed roles via the GDAP process?
Now, currently, if you want to onboard a customer, you can do it in two ways. If you want to do the auto-configure option that we have, we require you to still have a DAP to a DAP relation. If you have GDAP already up and running, then yes, just as with GDAP effectively is in control of the customer. Cloud User will, of course, still work with that, but you need to work together with your customer to get the onboarding finalized, because the customer essentially needs to approve that whole process, which is, well, fundamental to how GDAP, of course, works. So those are the two options. Either auto-configure, that can do bulk import of your customers and configure them. You need to have a regular classic DAP relation available. Otherwise, you can do it on a per customer basis. That works perfectly fine, but you need to work with your customer.
Yeah. Another question. Is Cloud User Hub able to create alerts like Leidos is doing, for example, on risky users?
Well, you can read back risky users, for example, with a schedule, and then even report on that. If you want to send out an alert, like an email or a text message, that's not something we have in product, but you just saw me use Power Automate. That's one of the tools that you can use to, for example, send out an email if that's required, or do something else with logic apps. So that connection is possible.
Nice.
Not within product currently.
So another question about licensing. I believe that's one for me to answer. Is it per tenant or per user? Well, it's per user in the customer tenant, and you can decide how many users you would like to subscribe. For pricing, please reach out to your sales representative, because it depends on the volume you would like to subscribe to the solution. So far, that was the last question. Maybe there are coming in more if we have not managed to answer your questions. Again, we will be reaching out on it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hope to see you soon.